This time on Captain Chaos's Laboratory, we're going to be working on Hawthorne Village piece. This is the Skier's Paradise, Thomas Kincaid Mistletoe Mountain collection. So, it doesn't work. That's why it's here. So I've had this for a short time. And the problem is, can't get into it. So I have poked it, prodded it, stared at it, and done what I could, and there's no access that I can find. Been trying to find another one I can get, I can break open to see what its secret is. No luck. Right here, there are two holes. You can see one's there, one's over there. If you shine a really bright light through here, because it's translucent, brighter than what I have right here, you can see through these holes inside. And that doesn't help me with the disassembly, but it tells me it looks like the motor is right down here because it doesn't move. It's supposed to have characters that spin around. They're over there. I don't want them near where we're working at the moment. And it's a chain. There's a chain that goes up and around. It's a real chain. I can see it through the holes. But there's no resin seams that I can find, which is pretty rare. So it looks like, from my perspective, and I could be wrong and probably am, that the seam is right here along the snow line. Problem with that is if it is correct, you're going to get the snow line so hot you're going to discolor the snow and get rid of all the sparkle. If I'm wrong, you're going to discolor the snow and get rid of all the sparkles. So yeah, it's pretty much a lose-lose situation. But, and the bottom is solid, but I did speak with the owner and we've concluded to cutting a hole in the bottom. So I am not going to cut a full-size hole. I'm going to drill a hole in it to get a better look inside. So I said, looking through these holes right here, it looks like the motor is right here at the bottom. Which is weird, but the wires then, because believe it or not, with a set of magnifying glasses on and a really bright light up against this plate, you can see a lot inside here. And it looks like the wires just run across the bottom all the way to the back, because that's where your on-off switch is and your power port. So, and it's just a motor. It doesn't make sounds. It probably doesn't even have a circuit board. It's probably just direct drive, because there's no reason for it to have anything other than just some wires. It might have maybe a capacitor or a resistor just to control speed and noise, because you can plug this with a multi-adapter into a bigger version of this set. There's a couple of the Thomas Kincaid series in the Hawthorne Village set or collection. So I'm going to start with a hole, and we're going to see what's inside. And then if it is there, we'll cut the bottom out. And I'm not going to cut a huge hole. I just want it big enough to get to the motor. If it's not there, then I'll drill a hole towards the back, because if not, then the motor would be right around here. I'm thinking it's going to be down here for weight, just to keep the weight lower. This is a very heavy piece. It is a thick cast resin shell with a thin spot where there's a couple of holes in the back. And hopefully I can just cut enough out of it to access the motor and replace it. So if you plug it in and you flip the switch, you can hear a noise for a couple of seconds and it stops. Doing that while looking through the holes, I saw no movement. So I'm assuming that it's a synchronous motor. I would assume it's a synchronous motor because it's got a chain attached to it for the torque, but I'm assuming it's a synchronous motor, and just like all synchronous motors, when they fail, it breaks the gears that are inside the synchronous motor. So if this is your first video before I start making noise, this is a synchronous motor. So the motor is actually right here in the center, the drive, the armature, and then these pins are gears. So this pin in the center is the armature of the motor, the end of it to keep it centered. Then it has a gear that drives this gear, that drives this gear, this gear, and that drives the shaft. This gear reduction determines the torque and the RPM, because these are all rated in different RPMs. This one's like a 4 or 5. The sticker that was on the back fell off. And it's 120 volt model. So you also have to be aware of the voltages. I think this is like 9 volts DC. I'm gonna have to double check. The power supply is also over there, so it's away from the destruction. Because if you watched any of the other videos where I've done the Mickey Mouse pieces, they resin them shut so you can never access the inside, and then you have to carve the bottom out of them. It's loud and it makes a massive mess because of the shredded resin. So I'm trying to keep stuff away from this, because if I have to go that far, I don't want all the components to stick here in the holes, because there's a little like the snow, a little mound of snow with a tree or two in it that go down the center, and then the characters go around. I don't want any of that covered in that debris, because it's kind of hard to get it out of the texturing that they did for the snow. So first things first, I'm going to tip it onto its side, and I'm going to drill a small hole. This is a 1/4 inch drill bit, so I'm just going to drill a small hole in the vicinity I think the motor is in, based on what I could see from looking underneath. I didn't go really fast. One, I don't want to heat up the resin, and 2, I don't want to punch through and hit something on their side, or completely miss and have that drill bit smack the underside of the ski area. So now, this is what I'm talking about, the mess. If I end up having to cut a big hole in here, or in here, wherever the motor may be situated, I'll be using a Dremel tool, and they make a big mess. So that's why I have a lot of, other than my tools, I have a lot of the stuff I'm working on moved farther away, because I don't want the dust getting into the mechanisms of the houses that are open for repair. So I'm going to use a flashlight, and I'm going to try and take a peek inside. Stuff in the hole. Well, I see the chain. Looks like I'm at the bottom side of the drive. So I'm going to peek in the back again just to see if I can see my hole. So it looks like I'm a little short of the bulge where it looks like the motor is going to be. So I assume the motor would be right about here, but my hole is underneath the casting, so I think the motor is actually closer to the where it says Hawthorne. I'm going to drill another hole right here. Pilot holes are better than just cutting the entire bottom out. I really, like I said, like I was telling her, because we've been in communication, I really don't like damaging the Hawthorne Village series stuff, because they do a really good job on their design and paint job, the coloring, and they're all green on the bottom. At least every one I've ever had has been. And they have this really neat stamp they put on there of the fake signature, and then somebody writes in there what number it is. This is sculpture A1928. And they call them sculptures. I mean, they go out of their way. They're not as big as like Department 56 or Limax, but they are nice items. And they have the Munster series. That's what I used to have from Hawthorne Village. And then I gave it to somebody that wanted to start their own villaging stuff. So, all right, let's make another hole and see what we can see. Cleaning out the holes, get any of the debris or chips out. fun part of trying to maneuver it around and see inside. You can still see the chain, and I still see the big white housing. I really wish I knew if that was the drive or if that was the idler. So I did try to buy one of these, but the person that was selling it was in another country and they didn't want to ship it internationally. Yeah, those wires go down to it. That's why I keep assuming it's the motor area. I can see my light now from the bottom. Cool. Alright, so looks like I'm in the area that I want to be in. I'm a lot closer with that second hole. So you can see there's the two holes right there. Camera won't be able to see inside. It's going to look black no matter what I do. So I'm going to hook up the Dremel and I'm going to carve out a square right in here. Probably no, I don't want to go much deeper in this hole because I do want to try and salvage the stamp they put on here if at all possible. So I'm going to go ahead and slice out a little bit bigger of a hole. I'll probably just start with a small hole, maybe just connect these two and go a little past them on each side. So I'm just going to cut out a little square, or as close to a square as possible, and see what we can do to get inside here. So because of its noise, I am going to pause it while I cut it, but I'll show you what I'm going to cut it with, besides the Dremel itself. So I'm going to use just a miniature cutoff wheel. So I'll probably, when I cut, it won't be any bigger than this. I'm just going to plunge in, rotate, plunge in, rotate, plunge in, and just make 4 lines and then connect them. And then where they're, because it's round, and if you try and cut a square hole with a round, you're going to have some material that doesn't get cut. I'll probably just finish that off with a miniature, like a saw blade. So not a saw blade for the Dremel, but a handheld saw blade. So, but this will help anybody in the future that has this piece that has the motor, because once I get through to the bottom, I can look around on the inside and try and find a better way of accessing this, if there is a better way of accessing this. Don't know, won't know, but we're going to try and find out. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this, make sure my power's on. It is. While I cut this, you're not listening to the obnoxious amounts of noise, and the camera just sees puffs of dust and it'll obstruct the lens a little bit. So I shall return. Okay, I'm back. The cutoff wheel works okay, but a diamond engraver that's small helped get the corners, couldn't get the saw to go in. So that helped get the corners where the round wouldn't work. So I haven't looked inside. I want to do it all together. You can see the cut. So there's the thick piece, and let's take a look. I'm definitely going to have to remove a lot of this bottom. That's going to be horrible. I really didn't want to, but yeah, a whole bunch of this is going to have to come off. This is a monster assembly. I thought maybe it was just a standard size synchronized motor. Also, the motor is closer to the center. It's probably right about here. The end of the motor is over here with a swing arm. So I'm going to bring it up to the camera here in just a second, so you can see what I can see through the access hole. Let me get a better grip on this. There we go. So, I don't know if this is going to help or not. There's the chain, and this is the motor. It's not even in the center. It's over here. But yeah, there's the black chain. It appears to be a metal chain. It's a small chain. And I see a drive pulley and wires. The wires is what I'm thinking the reason why this is the motor. Unless this has a switch that stops it from overdriving, I have no idea whether it be a wire. So the motor assembly goes to right about here because it's at an angle, so this whole section has to be removed. So what I'm probably going to do is, because we're going to try and keep this, is maybe just cut out a big square so that way this section can still be kept where it says what it is. So just slice, slice, slice. So basically making a little Hawthorne Village Ski Paradise sign out of the resin. But you can see how thick this is. It's about a 1/4 inch thick. Using the edges of this mat have a smaller line for measuring. So that's some thick resin. That's 1/4 inch thick. So if you use a diamond bit to take in the corners, so when this is cutting, I'll tip it slightly at an angle and still hold it so it doesn't hit the trees. So when I plunge cut, as you can see, that's as far as I went. It doesn't quite go all the way down, and then when you go this way, it doesn't even come close. So then that's why I use that small diamond bit to connect them. I'll be using that to make the big square, and then using that to do the corners where, you know, the circle doesn't quite reach. So that's where we're at now. So now I need to switch it back over and remove the entire bottom. So same thing, to conserve on time and noise. I'm going to pause the video while I start surgically removing a big chunk of the bottom of this. I really didn't want to, but they don't really leave much of an option. So anyhow, that's a quick update on the hole, and you can see what's inside. Now let's cut out a much bigger hole so we can try and fix this. And because this has the rubber feet on the bottom, you don't have to technically put anything back in the hole. But if you wanted to, you could remove the rubber feet and put the self-sticking felt on to cover the hole, and then trim the felt around the shape of the stones. So that is an option. But then you also cover what it is. So, but anyway, I shall return in just a moment. Okay, we're back, and here's the rectangle. Not perfect. I'm not good at freehand cutting all the time. Make sure you wear safety squints if you do this with any village, because the blade will throw stuff occasionally, or the blade might break. You don't want it in your eye. So here's the bottom. I was wrong on a synchronous motor. There it is. So there's the chain. There's the wires, red and white. There's the pulley with the motor. Now if I just spin this pulley, the belt slips over the small pulley. If I spin the small pulley, the chain doesn't move, which indicates not only is there a belt problem, there's a gear problem inside. So the motor assembly is off to the side. So if you have this piece and you're looking at it from the front, the motor is right in here. I'm gonna try not to cut any more of this out. I should be able to get to the 2 screws. You can see there's one there and there's one there. There's no other screws that I can see in this housing to open it up to see the gears on the inside and the motor. But I do have to get the power supply so we can actually see if it spins, and that it's not just a broken gear. If the motor doesn't spin, then the motor's probably bad. So let's grab the power supply. It's got the 3 head, because it's, like I said, it's a multi-piece set, and this is a really short cord. It's, in case you were wondering, it is 23 inches. 23 inches, the cord only goes to about here from my plug. So it's a little shorter than I'd like for maneuvering this around. So we're going to go ahead and use the 3 head extension that comes with, and plug it in. And plug one of these in. Goes right there. let's flip her over and flip the switch. Oh, look, now it's working. That's crazy. It wasn't working before. But look at that go. I think the whole problem is the belt slipping, because the belt's still slipping. I can see the belt as it's turning. You might be able to see in the camera how it's bouncing. So it definitely needs a belt. So let's go ahead and change the belt. Of course, I moved everything because of the amount of dust. And the reason you don't see any of it here is because before I start the camera, I vacuum. I don't really want to be breathing the resin dust and kicking it around. So I vacuum it up. If you ever work with fiberglass, it smells just like that when you're cutting it. Now, if you get that smell, that means you're getting the blade too hot, so you're moving too quickly. So slow it down. Ugh, this belt's sticky. Well, not sticky, it's like moist. So here's the replacement belt I'm going to use. It's black versus the red that's on here. This is the same material though. So this is the stretchy rubber. This is stretchy rubber, which is nice. This belt I get from Skull Crane. I always link them below because I love their belts. Right now they're too busy to get me the belts I want. I'm trying to buy a special belt kit so I don't have to buy a ton of the belts I don't use because they're not standard. This belt's not standard, but this belt's also slightly too big. All right, let's get the smaller one. But their belts, these rubbery type belts are so much better than the thinner ones. So if you have a chance, get the Skull Crane belts. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, which I understand, you can get the cheaper ones on Amazon. The belt kit from Skull Crane, which includes multiple sizes of multiple belts, is like $13. I usually buy like 5 or 6 kits at a time that go through a lot of belts. But if you only need one, Amazon sells them like 2 packs. Alright, let's see if that does anything. Where's the switch? That makes it, I think the belt's a little too tight. It's making it spin too slow. So, let's see what other belts I got. Also, the whole housing's moving, and that would be because it's designed to. Interesting. It's got suspension. Nice. It's probably for the chain. I would think they would leave you access so you can oil the chain. That's what's on this belt. That's why it's kind of wet. It's the grease or oil from the chain. It's running down the motor casing. Interesting. But it's a real chain. It's metal. And the gears are metal too. So up top you have 2 gears. The camera is not going to show it, so I apologize. I'll try, but I'm just going to describe most of it. So up top here you have 2 gears. They're side by side with about an inch gap between the teeth, or about 2.5 inches off of center pins. Those gears then the chain goes through 2 followers, which over here is a static gear. Over here is a secondary follower. Then it goes into the motor drive, which has 2 gears. Right. Yep. And then the 2 gears, the whole motor assembly pivots as a tensioner. It's on a spring. So instead of adding a tensioner in its loop, like Department 56 does with their ski lift as an example, or their ski hill or sledding hill, they have that tensioner for the belt. This uses the whole motor assembly as a tensioner. So cuts down on 1 extra gear. Probably saves on weight too. Like I said, this is heavy. Like I said, that's the problem. You can't really see. Let's see if I shine a light in here. Nope. How about here? So there's the power. And there's your 2 gears with the chain. There's your 2 followers. 1, 2. On this side you have 1 follower, and then a gear, and then another follower. And then this motor assembly, I'm going to reposition my hand so I don't drop it or break it. So right there, you see that single screw. If I grab, yeah, I can move it, and how the chain changes tension. That screw slides like that, which is your tensioner. So there's probably a spring on the other side of that housing, and that spring keeps the chain under tension. Because even though this isn't like a bicycle or a motorcycle, I'm sure that chain will stretch. Now I just need to find the right size belt. And with my luck, I'll have the wrong size belt. Let's try this belt. This belt looks good, right? If the hole was bigger, I could get my fingers in there, but I'm not going to make it any bigger. And we have tools, so we'll use tools. There we go. See if that belt works. Problem with belts is they're too loose, they slip, like this one's slipping. And if they're too tight, they pull and they bind because it's trying to bend everything in. Power supply switch, that's right. And it just stopped. Yeah, I think it's got a broken gear. Oh yeah, you can hear it. Well, I can hear it. Okay. So, let's move all of this off to the side and take those two screws out. It was going, and then it went crunch, and then it stopped. I pushed on it, it went past the crunch, continued, and then it went crunch and it stopped again. And that's not good. Everything's covered in dust from, cutting it. This is nice because there's a dark hole in here. And, like, I'm just hoping that the spring isn't attached through the housing into where I'm taking it apart, because it's going to be really hard to put tension back on with this small of a hole. And now that I have it open, let me take a look and see how they made this thing. Ooh, apparently I need to vacuum in here a little more. Yeah, it's just like I thought. So I was right on at least that one. This is all one solid casting. So this rock assembly is all one solid casting. And this is glued on top with resin glue. Yeah. Barely see the seam. They did a really good job. So they made this rock formation, this wedge, and then they glued this into this top cap. Then they poured resin and stuck it on, and then they painted it, which is why it's hard to see what it is. I need a little more light down here. So apparently the little pulley doesn't want to fit through the hole, so I got to pop the little pulley off, which is what's attached to the motor. It should just slide off if I can get in there. It's just a compression fit. I'm trying to get in there without breaking it. There you go, starting to move. Got it. So there's the pulley. Now, the gearbox should come open. And here's the gearbox. There's still gears inside. Oh, these are little guys. Unless the motor's dying. The motor is a standard 6-volt large motor. Here's the next gear, which I think this guy goes right here. And then we have the drive gear for the chain. That one is pressed on a knurl, and then it's pressed into the chain. So let me just check it while it's in here. Hopefully it's not broken, because I have no idea how to get this one, the replacement. And the crunching is a piece of debris right there. Looks like the grease has solidified into almost like concrete. It's really hard. But yeah, there's a piece of debris inside the gearbox. It's probably the crunching sound. The motor looks good. Unfortunately, it's covered in oil, which isn't good. Where's the power switch? Oh, no, the motor sounds bad. Oh yeah, motor's bad. So, damn it. Alright. I'm going to bring it closer to the camera, so hopefully you can hear it. It's repair ASMR. Sounds pretty horrible, doesn't it? If I put a load on it, it doesn't. And when I put a load on it, it slows down a lot. I'm not even putting that much pressure. I'm just barely touching it. And the armature shouldn't wiggle. So I can wiggle the armature. I'm wiggling the whole housing, but the armature is wiggling first. The armature should be pretty solid. That's the motor. So this thing needs a motor. It's a, I think this is a 6-volt or 9-volt unit. Let me check. 9-volt. Okay. Let me see what I got. I have no 9-volt pancake motors, so it means I'm going to have to order one. It takes about 4 or 5 days to get here. So it comes from Florida. So I order these style motors from Mr. Christmas, repair guy out in Florida. So it's Suntronics, or Happy Holidays parts, like I always advertise. So that is the motor. Now, those motors are generally 6 to 8 volts. This motor, I believe, is rated up to 12. So I'm going to double check. It should be an SRF 500. That's usually the average. My next problem is how do I get the motor out? Because, like I said, that gear right there, that pin has knurling on it. I can see it. It's pressed through the entire housing into the gear that drives the chain. I really don't want to disassemble all that because of the tension. And I've got to figure out a way to lubricate this chain to where it won't get into the motor, because the motor is shiny. I don't know if you can see it in the camera very well. It doesn't show up much, but if you look in the hole, it's nice and shiny silver. It's actually wet. So it's got grease or oil that has gotten inside of it. It's not wet like water. It's got something in it that's going to be liquidy when it gets hot. And you can see, it's hard to tell because it's whitewashing in the camera. Let me get a little closer where the light's not so bright. Look at all that crusty grease. It's almost like paste you can see on my thumb. So this is all got to get cleaned. We're going to use 99% isopropyl alcohol and a toothbrush and just literally scrub the grease off of it. I'm not going to do it right now. My biggest concern now is we got to get a motor, and then we got to be able to get the motor in inside this unit. Normally those holes in the front are for screws, so the motor is screwed into place. This has no screws, so I have a funny feeling it is glued into place. So I'm going to move the wires, because the wires are hot glued to the casing. I'm going to break those free. I'm going to see if the motor slides out. It might just be pressed in. Okay, can't get a grip on it, so let's try. Let's clean that off first. Let's try maybe a little prying action and see if it moves at all. I'm hoping it's pressed in. I really am. looks like it might be moving. It is. It's moving at an angle though. That's bad. I need it to come straight. There we go. Okay, so the motor is just pressed in. Thank God. So we have a small miracle there. So let's see if this motor has a stamp on it. No stamp. Let's check the back of it if there's a model number. You know what? It doesn't really matter. The one wire broke because there's corrosion, so I'm just going to trim the other one off. We're just going to pull it out. It's bad anyway, so it doesn't matter. Here's the motor. And the motor, and I'll lift this up again so you can see it in the camera. There we go. And we'll get some light in here too. There you go. See the green? See the green? That's corrosion. The motor is getting corroded, and this casing is oxidizing. And like I said, there's grease. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. I'm going to try here. Yeah, I can hear it, but I don't know if the camera will. I can also feel it. It's not a smooth spin. If you ever spun a motor, it spins smoothly. It just spins. There's some resistance because of the magnetic windings, but it just spins. This is going click, 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 click as it spins, which is the sign of a dying motor. And I can feel it. So when you spin a motor, the shaft is a smooth spin. It's just a constant pressure, no vibration. When I spin this, it feels like it's wobbling. It's going blah, 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 blah in my finger. Also, like I said, the shaft shouldn't move. So, but if this is like the ones from Mr. Christmas, which is a standard hobby motor, it's a standard large pancake motor. I believe it's an SRF 500. I'm checking my motor pile here of bad motors. There we go. Different face, but as you can see, it's the same motor. You can see this one's covered in grease too. Let's see what it says. It says it's an SRF 500. Look at that. So I remembered. This one is actually listed as a 500 TB. Tom Boy. This one does not give you a voltage range either. But it does say it's a 21,193 RPM motor. So the RPMs are important. The RPMs determine how fast it's going to move the whatever it is. In this case, it'd be skiers around the track based on its gear reduction. Because they're not moving 21,000 RPM, they just fly right off. It'd be really cool, but it would be absolutely pointless. So what this gear reduction is doing is reducing the speed and increasing the torque. So most like this SRF 500 motor, I'm going to assume it's going to be right around 18 to 21,000 RPM, which is the standard range for most of these. And I just got to get some on order. So we're going to pause the video here, and we're going to get a motor on order. I'm going to show you this before I do that. The only marking on this entire casing is the letter V right there by my finger. So most companies don't care. They just buy motors, slap them in, and when they're out of stock, they don't make the product anymore. So they're like, not our problem. So if you look inside, see those two fingers? There's another two on that side. Those two fingers fit on either side of this. So what those fingers are doing is they're holding the motor so the motor doesn't spin, because that would be bad. And then the casing is so tight that it just rubs right down the side and kind of holds it in place. So the press fit keeps it centered, and the fingers keeps it from spinning like that inside of that casing and ripping the wires off. So this side that's rotted is the one that broke, that's got the worst rot, and then this is the one I cut. So, but anyhow, there it is. So far, the Skier's Paradise from Hawthorne Village. So you do have to cut the bottom out, and you will have to perform some surgery. Now you know where to cut, so you don't have to make this additional notch right here. I am going to keep these pieces, and I'll probably send them back in the box in case she wants to try and hot glue them in, or I'll ask her if she wants me to, the owner of this piece. Like I said, I hate cutting stuff like this open. Unfortunately, there's pieces like this that there's no other option, especially the Disney ones. They intentionally make it so you can never fix them. Hawthorne Village, this is the first one I've ever had to actually cut open. They've always had access points of some sort, not like a screw, but you could find out where the access was. So anyhow, we're going to stop here, and we'll pick this back up when this arrives. Well, I'll probably order more than one, but when the motors arrive, we'll get this thing fixed up. In the meantime, I will take a picture, send it to her, let her know what we ended up doing, and seeing if she wants me to glue this in or just leave it as a gaping hole. Either way, I will do whatever is requested, and then we'll continue. So, shall return in your world in a moment, in my world, probably a week. Okay, we're back. Got the motor, put it in, cleaned and lubricated the gearbox, except the SD card didn't pick it up. So now that I know that the card didn't pick up the reassembly, which is just the opposite of disassembly, so for most people it would be just easy. You can see I put one of the skiers on here, and I didn't put the center on. I don't like to take all the accessories out if I don't have to, because it's just that chance of dropping it, breaking it. Having one of these light stands that are right here, fatigue and fall into it. Especially on something like this, because I've been looking for one to smash or break to see their secrets on the inside, so I didn't have to cut this one open. And the cheapest I could find was like $150 overseas, and they wouldn't ship it. So it didn't matter. It's just one of those things. So, but there we go. I'm going to show you the bottom. You can see the little guy going around, or girl, I don't know. Looks like a guy. So I'm going to put this out of the way. All right, I'm going to flip her over so you can see what's going on inside. You can see, there you go. Now, when I first put this in, I didn't know which the red or white wire went to. It was backwards. But the tensioner that's up there, which of course you can't see, of course. So that idler gear, you need to make sure it goes down. So it's pulling down towards the bottom. Well, the reason being is if it goes the other way, you get a big slack right there, where the chain will just dip in because it's not under the spring tension. The spring only works in one direction. So if you solder it in backwards, you can take it out and resolder it, or if you want to do like I did, just cut the wire and resolder it. It makes it way easier, being a fidgety. I did glue the wire back to the side, and that's so it doesn't get sucked up into the chain. Letting this thing run, I noticed that one of these links wasn't working. So it's like a bicycle chain. And one link, which is right there, didn't want to flex. So I went ahead and put a little lubrication on the chain. Now, normally if it's like a bicycle, you'd use oil. But I don't want to put any oil in here because oil destroys motors and gears. So I use some PTFE grease right here. So the motor came from Happy Holidays parts, and I'll link below. The belt came from Skull Crane, which I'll link below. The replacement motor looks exactly the same, except it has the information on the side. The part number, Suntronic's website, or Happy Holiday parts, and it's max RPM and its voltages. And that if you can wire it forward or backwards for forward or reverse rotation. So it comes with all that information. It also comes with a tube of grease. Well, at least the one I ordered. You can order these directly from Happy Holiday Parts in these little tubes, and I think he sells them in 5 or 10 packs. I have them, I just can't find them, but I'm glad it came with one. But this is Super Lube, and it's hard to see because I've been squeezing it, so I'm rubbing off the ink. But right here it says PTFE Grease. So I cleaned the gearbox with 99% alcohol. I cleaned all the gears, made them nice and pretty. Let's put the skier back on so you know that it's still working. Gotta find the magnet. Look, he's going backwards. There we go. It's not like the Parma 56 where it self-centers, because the magnet's off-center. It'll literally go around backwards. It's kind of weird. But, so I cleaned all the gears with isopropyl alcohol 99%. I used an old toothbrush to clean the gears that were in the gearbox I had setting here. And then I used a cotton swab to clean the gearbox housing and the one gear on the inside. I put this on the shafts, because the gears spin on the shafts. And I put on the teeth to help reduce friction wear. And that's it. And I didn't, like you can tell, I didn't use a lot of the tube. I did enough to make sure I got a nice coating. Too much, it gets hot, turns into oil, and it drips out. Then I used some on the chain, and then I worked it in to some of the links with a screwdriver. The big rotating gear teeth will work it in as well, but I wanted to make sure we got enough coverage to where it doesn't jump. But basically, if you've ever seen a chain that has a sticky link, instead of it curving naturally, it has a stiff spot, so it turns and it lifts. And every time it's doing that, that gearbox will go thunk, 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 because it's on a spring. And you could hear it. You could hear the tension as it would go over this gear, this gear, this gear, and then back to the gearbox. So check your chain if you have this piece. When you cut a hole in the bottom, just let it run. And if you have a sticky link, stop it where you can see it, and then address it with something. You can use oil or grease. I'm going to use grease because grease is a little thicker. The chain's not going to get hot, not like the motor does, so I'm not worried about the chain dripping. Oil, chain's going to drip. And there is a circuit board in here. It's a very basic circuit board, but it's a speed control circuit board for the motor. And what it basically does is it's got a big voltage regulator and heat sink connected to it. It's actually soldered to the back right here, and then it's hot glued to the resin. So power right here in the corner, you see, switch, and then it's right about here. And what that does is control the motor, so the motor can't basically go out of control, spin too fast. If you have no power, you got good power here and the switch is working, and you open it and there's no power at the motor, it's going to be the little component all the way in the back right here, which if you cut a hole here for the motor and you have a pair of long needle nose pliers, you can reach it. Because I had to break the glue joint back there to pull the wires out to cut them and solder them and then put them back in with glue. So you can reach it if you just cut one axis hole instead of cutting two. The voltage regulator, you can buy those online and replace it. It's just two components in the back. You have a capacitor. So this motor comes with this little guy right here. And the one in the back is an actual electrolytic capacitor, which they're much larger. I don't have one lying around just to show you on camera. I got all sorts of crap lying around, but not one of them. But it's basically like the size of like an N cell battery. And if you watched other stuff, it's a smoothing capacitor for the motor. So since it already has a much larger one than what most motors have, I just kept the original one in there and not put that one in as well. Yeah, so none of the gears were cracked after cleaning it. It's a lot quieter. The gearbox is quieter. So basically this took a Dremel tool to access the bottom and then a screwdriver to get the two screws out. It took grease, a motor, and a belt. That's it. So not terribly difficult to replace. The hardest part being cutting the bottom open, and also the most concerning part, because if you have this piece, it's a very rare piece now. The other one in the series, the small pond, I can find that everywhere. It's this specific one of the multi-set that is the one that's really hard to find. So it is a replaceable part, and you can do it. You just got to be careful when you're cutting the bottom. Somehow just be careful. Use a Dremel. If you have a variable speed Dremel, I use mine at a low medium speed. If it starts to get too hot, bump the speed up. Make sure you have a good cutting wheel. You can use a fiber wheel like I was using, or they even make the miniature saw blades, which work too. But if it grabs, it will pull it right across the bottom and leave little teeth marks. Kind of ruins the aesthetic. Or you can just cut it with a burring tool or a diamond tip tool, like I was using to clean up the corners. That's going to get the tip hot, so you got to cut back off, and that's to allow the air to cool the bit while it's spinning. No matter what you do, it's going to produce a lot of dust. So this is resin. It smells like fiberglass resin when it's cutting. So I would recommend good ventilation if you do it in a house, and a mask or something to cover your mouth and nose. Safety squints or protective eyeglasses or goggles. If you're using a fiber, anything, because if that fiber disc breaks and those things go 30,000 RPMs and it flies off, you might be a pirate. And we're not looking for that. So just take your time and take a precaution. The rest of it's pretty easy. Now, I did talk to the owner again, or communicate with them. I do it through email. That way there's always a communication record. And I'm going to go ahead and hot glue in the bottom. So I'm going to put a bead of hot glue and then shove in the bottom and let it cure. Then another bead of hot glue. And the reason I'm going to do it in steps is because I have to compensate for what the saw removed. So I'm not going to just shove it against the edge and glue it. I'm going to leave a gap to compensate for what the cutting tool removed. Try and keep it centered and make it look nice. So, but I'll link below where I got the motor from and where you can get this stuff from if you don't have any. And you can buy this at Home Depot carries it by me. They don't carry it in little tubes. They carry it in a jar. So yeah. Tubes are nice because you can spin the gears and squeeze it and have the gears pull the material in. If it's in a jar, you might have to use something like a toothpick or a screwdriver and scoop out a chunk and let the gears, as it spins, pull it in. I just spun it by hand since the gearbox was laying on the bench versus using the motor to do it. You'll need to know how to solder. I do not recommend twisting the wires on like I've seen on a couple. And that's because if this vibrates enough, your wires will come off and then you have to take it back apart. So, but that's about it on this one. Hawthorne Village, not a very common thing to come through on the workbench, mainly because they're usually not animated. A lot of the pieces are just lit. But if you happen to specifically have this piece, you're going to have to cut the bottom off. And that's because this is glued to underneath the snow, and underneath the snow from the inside you can see the big thick resin seam. I would not recommend trying to remove it that way. You'll end up damaging the snow like I mentioned, as well as possibly just breaking the entire mountain. Now if you don't care and you just want this piece, you can make your own foam version, like the foam version, a much larger foam version from Department 56, and make your own. That's your choice. So if this gets broken somehow, let's say you own one and it falls. Gravity is a wonderful thing, right? And it shatters the entire mountain. Don't just throw it away. I mean, you can pull the trees out. You can pull this out. You can heat them up and remove them. The light poles. These aren't. These are a little bit harder, but you can. If you get it hot enough, you can pull out the pine trees. Make your own. Just kind of trace out the outline of this and stick it in a piece of foam or wood, or make your own resin cast out of silicone mold. But it's a nice piece. It's an interesting piece. It's the first one I've ever seen to use as a chain versus a fiber or rubberish belt, neoprene rubber, thing like that. So this one uses a chain. Chain will outlast a unit, I'm going to tell you that. So as long as you don't get any moisture inside. Now, being a sealed unit, the only way it would come in is through here and here, and the fact that this has two vent holes back here. The chain should pretty much last you forever. So, but there you go. Any questions or comments, put them below. And until the next one, thanks for watching.